Hey guys, and welcome to a new video. It's been a while since I last uploaded a video on this channel, hasn't it? It's been a few months, but here we are again because Harman Smith has officially lost it. Like, he is salty, man. I have not seen him this salty since the Steam Deck was announced and then came out. But what's that, you ask? Why is Harman Smith saltier than he was when the Steam Deck came out? Why? Because of a new game called Palworld, of course. Like, you thought he was salty with the Steam Deck? You thought he was salty with Elden Ring, with Hi-Fi Rush, with Baldur's Gate 3? No, man, this game has him saltier than even Baldur's Gate 3 does, and that game that has him this salty is Palworld. Anyways, we have a bunch of salt to cover in the coming days, so let's just hop right into it.
So last night I did a warning stream talking about Palworld, the game that the indie YouTube scene is pretending is like gonna be the Pokemon killer, is gonna be some big thing. It has 500,000 concurrent players on Steam. It's sold over 1 million copies. It's over for the Pokemon Company.
I love that ridiculous little wacky inflatable flailing arm flailing tube man thing Harman did there. Like, seriously, I can't be the only one who saw it like that, right? At least he got a little more exercise than he's gotten in a long time, though, so there's that. Anyways, no, Palworld doesn't have 500,000 concurrent players on Steam. It had, at one point, 2 million concurrent players on Steam. Also, Harman, a question for you. But why is it that you act like a non-Nintendo game doing well is going to destroy some Nintendo subsidiary? We'll get into this more down the line, but for right now, and I've said it before, and I'll say it again, but Nintendo has clearly stopped caring about the Pokemon IP. Pokemon, at least the main series games, are now basically Nintendo's Dynasty Warriors, and I say that as a huge fan of both Pokemon and Dynasty Warriors, but for the next several Harman Smith videos, just keep that in mind. Please continue, Mr. Smith.
It's over for Nintendo, right? I talked about what people were gonna do, and yeah, I was right. Like, all day long, we were bombarded with ridiculous notions that, like, oh, this game is a masterpiece. Oh, look at me play this game. Oh, look at how great it is. And now that the hype session is over, much like Temtem before it, the game is completely forgotten. It is dwindling in popularity.
Harman? Palworld had over 2 million concurrent players on Steam, and that's before we get into the Xbox gamers playing it as well. And considering that the game just came out and people are still playing it today, yeah, I'd say that this game has a long way to go before it's forgotten about. But hey, you want to know what actually has been forgotten about? Pokemon. Especially Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. I haven't heard anyone talking about those games in a month of Sundays, and I also haven't heard anyone outside of you talk about Tears of the Kingdom in a month of Sundays either. So that's another game we can say that is forgotten about. Oh, let's not forget about that Super Mario RPG remake on the Switch that just came out a few months ago either. That game isn't even a year old, and I haven't heard anyone talking about it either. Please, Harman, for the love of God, when you talk, please don't make it possible for people to return your logic back at you. Okay? Please, for my sake, can you do that?
More and more people are starting to notice, like, what's going on. The game is being shilled. You know, YouTubers aren't exactly the biggest advocates for game quality anyway, right? They just jump onto trends.
You mean exactly like what you're doing in this very video?
Right? So with that in mind, with what's been going on, like, what can we learn from this, right? What can we learn from this experience? Well, first of all, it doesn't seem to be possible to use the same kind of techniques to prop up a game like this that the industry uses for Baldur's Gate 3 or whatever.
Okay, I'm sorry to cut him off there, but before we continue and before I tear this part to shreds, I'm going to tell you that I know literally nothing about Overwatch because it isn't a game that interests me personally, but from what I've heard others say, it's not a good example to use here. So I have to cut this next little bit out, and even if I didn't, it has nothing to do with Palworld. And you know how Harman Smith loves to ramble on about things that aren't related to his videos, or the topic of his videos. Anyway, whenever I let Harman resume his little rant, we're going to jump straight into the Palworld stuff. Anyways, what does Harman mean exactly by techniques the industry uses to prop up games like Baldur's Gate 3? Does he mean organic growth, which is exactly what Baldur's Gate 3 did to earn GOTY 2023 and why so many people love it? And that's exactly what Palworld is doing. Both games' dev teams worked, or are working, hard to deliver quality products that people will enjoy. You know, the exact same thing Game Freak used to do in regards to Pokemon. However, starting with Pokemon X and Y, Game Freak began to give less and less of a crap about Pokemon because they know for a fact that their audience will just eat it up, regardless of how shoddily each new game in the Pokemon mainline series is put together, which Pokemon Scarlet and Violet prove, let's be real here. If Game Freak isn't going to give us quality creature collecting RPG experiences with their games, then they should let other companies try their hand at it. And here's the best part. Nintendo and Game Freak and the Pokemon Company cannot be mad about this. I know that TPCI put out a statement stating they were going to investigate Palworld, but let's be real. All that was an attempt to get the Nintendrones, like Harman Smith, to leave them the hell alone. I also find it utterly absurd how the Pokemon Company issued a statement saying that they cared about every Pokemon in its world. No, they don't, because if they truly meant that, then the Pokemon games today wouldn't be all that crappy, now would they? Anyways, please continue with the Palworld salt, Mr. Smith, if you don't mind.
And you don't want to admit it, right? You don't want to admit that the game wasn't that good to begin with, so you kind of jump through hoops and make excuses and kind of justify your attitude. You kind of justify why you act this way about these products. You kind of justify why things are becoming so... why these games are forgotten so quickly, right? Like Elden Ring, Baldur's Gate 3, like long term, these games are not going to be relevant. You know, Elden Ring is already trailing behind Dark Souls in best games ever made polls, right? Elden Ring is never going to be more popular than Dark Souls, just like Dark Souls is never going to be more popular than Skyrim, and just like how Skyrim is never going to be more popular than Zelda.
Zelda is an action-adventure game series, not an RPG series like the Elder Scrolls games are, so please stop comparing them and learn that for my sanity. Anyways, Harman, you're sitting there on that couch that probably has an ass print of yours on it, bitching about Elden Ring and Baldur's Gate 3 and Hi-Fi Rush and other non-Nintendo games, and for someone claiming that those games are forgotten, you sure do love to talk about them an awful lot. For games that are forgotten, you sure do seem to remember them. Anybody else notice that? Oh wait, that's right, he's trying to use them as some sort of a gotcha argument that's failing hard, to put it lightly. Regardless, would you please get to the point, Harman? I thought this video was supposed to be about Palworld, and yet here you are bitching about Overwatch, Elden Ring, and Baldur's Gate 3, when everyone else has played the crap out of those games and moved on to something else, in this case, Palworld. How sad your life must be to be bitching about other people having fun on non-Nintendo video games instead of playing your own Nintendo games. That sounds like a very sad life to me.
Right? Like, there is really nothing you can do, right, about to establish, to demolish these established Nintendo properties, right? By saying that, like, Palworld is going to, like, beat Pokemon, you would have to have a TCG, you would have to have a merchandise line, you would have to have, you know, an anime adaptation, you would have to have, like, all of this stuff, right? All of these highly successful, lucrative products.
Oh god, someone tell Harman that Palworld is already getting a TCG to go with it. He's gonna have a meltdown. Well, a worse meltdown than the one he's having right now. Also, way to move the goalposts there, Harman. Basically, since Nintendo is doing all of that shit with Pokemon, that means that Pocket Pair has to do it with Palworld to be successful. Never mind, like, 19 million players in around about a week's time. I see.
on top of the video game franchise, right? And whatever you think about the video game franchise right now, like, there's no denying that Pokemon is actually doing quite a bit better in those other avenues, right? Because I would have said before Gen 8, like, before Dexit, like, the big controversial thing people had about the brand was how the anime was being treated, how they didn't retire Ash, and how they weren't, like, really evolving the formula, and how, like, it was in this weird spot. Like, old fans didn't want to keep watching it, but new ones weren't really coming in, so they decided to finally retire Ash as a character and bring in some new people and, like, finally get some fresh blood in there and finally get some more creative storytelling and finally do some more things. Like,
no, Pokemon isn't. I love to be the one to tell you this, Harman, but Pokemon is basically Nintendo's Dynasty Warriors. Just like how Tecmo Koei is doing with Dynasty Warriors, Nintendo is doing the exact same thing almost with Pokemon. Both games' mainline series, at least, tells the exact same story as the last one. They don't evolve the gameplay in meaningful enough ways. The story is literally the exact same thing as the last one, and yet people gobble one series up and they crap all over the other, when they should be crapping on both series equally for pulling the exact same crap. If literally any other game company tried to pull the same crap as what Game Freak has been pulling with Pokemon, then they would be in so much hot water, it wouldn't be funny. But because Pokemon is owned by Nintendo, everyone just treats it like everything else Nintendo owned, and that is, they treat Nintendo's stuff like it's all the second coming of Christ. Oh, and just so that all of you know this, I'm saying and standing beside all of what I just said, as a huge Pokemon and Dynasty Warriors fan.
Like, years ago, the anime was in trouble. But then, like, the games picked up the slack now, and now with, like, the games kind of being attacked by these pretendos, like, the anime is kind of stepping up. You know, the TCG is stepping up. You know, like, the mobile apps are stepping up. Like, there is no way in the world that Palworld, like, a glitchy, uninspired, you know, straight up plagiarized mess is ever going to topple Pokemon.
While I will readily admit that some of the PAL's designs in Palworld do look a little too close to Pokemon characters for comfort, you can't just trademark, patent, or copyright art styles and the like. And most of the PALs of Palworld are distinct enough to be their own things. But the plagiarism thing has been debunked, Harman, as has the AI thing. And I know that you said in a live stream that the debunking of the plagiarism was itself debunked. You didn't provide any sort of evidence or citations or links, so that claim is dismissed automatically. Another thing that Harman and the other pissed off Nintendrones need to consider the next time something like this comes up is that Nintendo, Game Freak, the Pokemon Company, and Pocket Pair are all based in Japan. And Japan has literally no fair use laws. Fair use literally does not exist in Japan at all. So if a lawsuit were going to happen between Nintendo, the Pokemon Company, Game Freak, and Pocket Pair, it would have happened literally years ago. Like, the minute the trailer was released, Pocket Pair would have been hit with a cease and desist order. No questions asked.
And that was obvious to me from the beginning, before I even looked at what the game was and what it was like. And before I started realizing that, like, wow, these are just Pokemon designs with, like, different typings and different colors, right? like, before I realized how, like, blatant it was, right? Like, I was saying that, like, this is another Temtem. This is another Yokai Watch. This is another Digimon. You know, a flash-in-the-pan thing that's relevant because, like, people desperately need Pokemon to go away so they can start claiming that Nintendo is doomed, but, like, it just isn't happening.
Harman, no one is saying Nintendo is doomed. We just want Nintendo to innovate is all. Like what Palworld is doing. That's all we want. Could you please link to these people saying Nintendo is doomed? It's almost as if you yourself want Nintendo to fail instead of these quote-unquote people you claim are wanting Nintendo to fail.
Like, Pokemon, it's interesting because it's not just the fact that it's so entrenched and so popular. Like, Pokemon is completely dominant in its niche, right? In a lot of ways, like, I said this on my stream, like, I don't think you're ever going to topple Pokemon by doing the same thing as it is. Right?
Except that Palworld isn't doing the same thing as Pokemon is. Why would it want to? What Palworld does is it takes the Pokemon Legends Arceus formula and expands on it. If you want to talk about a creature collector RPG doing the same thing as Pokemon, then you should take a gander at Nexomon, Harman. It literally is a ripoff of Pokemon, and it's on the Nintendo Switch too, no less.
Looking at Palworld and seeing the designs and seeing like the monsters and the typings and just like the way the world is set up and stuff like that, like it's all just very Pokemon-esque, right? But they're not doing anything new with it, and they're not doing anything uninspired with it. Like they're not doing anything inspired with it. Like it's just the same thing, but ooh, you can craft. Like that's like the stupidest, like most basic thing you can possibly add to a game like this. Is like, ooh, you can add crafting. You can make anything you want. Like it's like it's one of those that kind of thing was being made fun of 10 years ago, right?
I don't know, Harman. Palworld's crafting is doing several new things that Pokemon isn't. For example, in Palworld, I can force my pals to be slaves, basically, and work all day and sleep outside while I get to sleep in a large house in a proper bed. Can't make my Pokemon do that in, well, Pokemon. In Palworld, if I want to get rid of my pals, I can sell them off to pal merchants for cash, and considering most pal merchants have guillotines and gallows and the like nearby, it doesn't exactly bode well for the pals you sell, now does it? Also, if you want to, you can also butcher your pals in Palworld for food and crafting materials. Again, can't do that in Pokemon. Also, in Palworld, you can beat the entire game without ever capturing a single pal, and I know this for a fact, because for my gaming channel playthrough, of which you're seeing footage of here for background purposes, I went for a good little while without ever getting a pal in any way, shape, or form. I mean, I found an egg, but I didn't hatch that egg until after I'd beaten a boss pal. In Pokemon, you're almost always forced to take a Pokemon of the types Grass, Fire, and Water. In Palworld, any pal can be your starter should you choose to take along pals. So no, Palworld isn't Pokemon-esque, at least not to the extent that you're talking about.
And now look at us, right? Gamers are doing the same thing they've done for the last several years, is prop up random games from small Chinese companies that are just plagiarizing Nintendo IPs.
Well, now that just sounds racist. Also, Pocket Pair is Japanese, first of all, and second of all, believe it or not, Harman, China does have their own games that are original, that aren't plagiarized from other games, especially not Nintendo's. Shocking, I know, but it is the truth. You really need to do some research before you make these videos, Harman. You make yourself look so stupid.
You know, plagiarizing Zelda with Genshin Impact, plagiarizing Pokemon with Palworld, you know, plagiarizing Animal Crossing, whatever, right? Like, it's the same thing over and over again, right? Nintendo is so dominant in these kind of spaces, you know, in anything that isn't a realistic first-person shooter or like a third-person action game where you go around killing the police, right? Like, anything that isn't that, like, Nintendo is dominant in. And, like, I don't think the rest of the industry is gonna ever be able to catch up by Pokemon by putting out a clone of it. Like, it isn't gonna work. Pokemon innovates too much.
And with that, we're stopping right there, because the last time Pokemon was innovative was with Pokemon Legends Arceus. Apart from that, we're now at the point where we can safely call Pokemon a scam. Seriously, folks, apart from the designs and the way you, well, a few of the designs, and the way you catch pals in Palworld, can you name me a single way in which Palworld rips off from Pokemon? Pocket Pair even had the proper people in Japan look at the game and say that everything in it was passing in terms of not infringing copyright, trademarks, patents, because you can't just trademark, copyright, or patent ideas, merely your expression of them. Simply put, Harman knows that Pokemon has fallen off hard in the popularity department, he just doesn't want to admit it. Also, a new rule for the channel. From now on, when we cover people, we only cover the proper talking points, because I forgot just how damn boring Harman Smith is. Anyways, I'm gonna let you all go. See you around, and I'll get back to covering more Harman Smith salt, including Palworld, whenever it warms up a little bit, because it is frickin' freezing where I live, man. Anyways, later, guys.